When did a family gathering become a high-stakes trap, threatening financial ruin? Smell of stale coffee and desperation had become the unofficial scent of my life over the last few months, but nothing quite prepared me for the sickening blend of pine air freshener and raw panic that hit me the moment I stepped inside the remote cabin. My stomach twisted, a familiar knot of anxiety tightening as I considered the impossible choice laid before us: betray a dying wish or condemn us all to financial ruin. It felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon, blindfolded and in the middle of a gale force wind. How had it come to this? How had a simple family gathering turned into a high-stakes game of economic chicken, all because someone couldn't grasp the basic concept of no money? The journey itself had been a premonition of the isolation we were about to experience. Miles of winding dirt roads, the kind where your phone signal flickered in and out like a faulty light bulb, the trees growing so thick they swallowed the sky. I'm Sarah Bell, 20F, and frankly, I'm used to roughing it. My own path hadn't exactly been paved with gold. I'd learned early on how to stretch a dollar and how to survive when the rug was pulled out from under you. Resilience, my few friends would call it. Stubbornness, my late grandmother would have said, but always with a fond smile. This cabin, tucked away in the deepest part of the North Carolina mountains, was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where my family, or what was left of it, could finally gather after. Well, after everything. Instead, it felt like a trap, carefully set and sprung. It was my grandmother's will that brought us here, or rather, the bizarre clause within it. Nana had always been eccentric, but this was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive financial engineering. Her estate, substantial but not limitless, was tied to a mandatory 2-week full family stay at this specific cabin, one shed owned for decades but rarely used. The kicker? No one could leave early. No one could duck out for a quick trip to town. Everyone had to be present for the full 14 days. If anyone broke the rule, the entire inheritance, meant to be split evenly, would instead go to a distant charity that Nana had always despised, a final, mischievous jab from beyond the grave. Will had been read 3 months ago, but it felt like yesterday. My lawyer, a perpetually tired man named Mr. Henderson, had just shrugged. Your grandmother was particular, Ms. Bell. It's all legally sound. So here we were, 6 adults, all with wildly different lives, crammed into a cabin that felt suddenly much smaller than it appeared in the faded photographs. My Aunt Diana Roberts, 61F, was already fussing over the kitchen, her perpetually worried brow creased even further. Deanna was the family peacemaker, the one who always tried to smooth things over, often at her own expense. She was a master of the gentle redirection, the soft suggestion, the sigh that conveyed 1,000 words of mild disappointment. I saw the storm brewing, I knew it, and her attempts to diffuse it were already beginning, like trying to put out a forest fire with a watering can. Sarah, darling, can you help me find the sugar? I swear Nana hid it in the strangest places, she called, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud, as if to drown out the unspoken tension. I nodded, already pulling out drawers, trying to ignore the way my phone, sitting uselessly on the counter, glowed with 1 bar of signal, then 0. Total disconnect. That had been part of Nana's plan, too. No outside distractions. No excuses. The first real crack in the veneer of forced pleasantness appeared less than an hour after everyone arrived. Gabriel Park, 37M, strode in, his expensive hiking boots making a statement on the worn wooden floor. Gabriel was my cousin, Nana's grandnephew, and an ambitious upstart in the tech world. He radiated an aura of curated success, from his perfectly styled hair to the subtle sheen of his designer sportswear. He was the kind of person who always seemed to be negotiating, even when just asking for the salt. He had a way of looking at you, not quite meeting your eye, but assessing, calculating. His presence in the cabin felt less like a family visit and more like a hostile takeover bid. No signal, he stated rather than asked, holding up his sleek phone like a sacred relic that had suddenly lost its power. Seriously, I explicitly told my team it'd be reachable. This is untenable. His voice, usually smooth and modulated, had a sharp edge to it. I watched Diana flinch, already preparing her conciliatory words. Oh, Gabriel, you know Nana loved her privacy out here, she said, her hands fluttering towards the kettle. It's part of the charm, isn't it? A real digital detox. Gabriel snorted a derisive sound. Charm, Aunt Diana, is subjective. Productivity is not. I am in the middle of a crucial Series B funding round. 2 weeks completely off the grid. This is going to cost me millions. Literally millions. He paced a small circle, his jaw clenched. Did Nana really not consider this? She was a sharp woman. She was also a woman who believed in family more than spreadsheets. Gabriel, a new voice cut in, crisp and a little too sharp. Sarah Perry, 44F, my other aunt, entered the living area, already inspecting a dust mote floating in the afternoon light. Sarah was a helicopter parent, though her only child was her 19-year-old nephew, Ben, who was conveniently away at a summer program, much to her obvious displeasure. She doted on him with an intensity that bordered on suffocation, and that same intensity was now focused on the cabin's supposed shortcomings. He was impeccably dressed, even for a remote cabin, her clothes speaking of quiet money and an even louder need for control. Honestly, Gabriel, you make it sound like the world stops without your constant input, Sarah continued, turning her critical gaze from the dust to him. Some of us actually appreciate a break from the relentless pursuit of profit. Ben always says the best ideas come from quiet reflection. Gabriel stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. Sarah, with all due respect, your idea of relentless pursuit of profit is ensuring Ben gets into an Ivy League despite his less than stellar grades. My idea is building a company that employs hundreds and contributes to the economy. It's not quite the same scale. The air thickened, each word a tiny needle. Deanna, bless her heart, tried to interject. Now, children, let's not bicker. We're all here for Nana. She loved us and she wanted us to be together. I slipped away, needing a moment, needing air that didn't feel quite so charged. I found Pamela Jones, 51F, sitting on the small porch swing, a worn copy of a classic novel open in her lap. Pamela was Nana's oldest friend, an honorary aunt, and easily the wisest person I knew. She had this quiet calm about her, an almost unnerving ability to see through people's facades without ever making them feel judged. Her presence was a comforting anchor in the shifting sands of family dynamics. "Having fun yet, Sarabelle?" Pamela asked, her voice soft, her eyes twinkling as she looked up. She always called me Sarabelle, a nickname from my childhood. I slumped onto the step below her, picking at a loose splinter. "It's only been 3 hours, Pam." I think I heard Gabriel's blood pressure spike when he realized he was truly offline. Pamela chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. "Ah, Gabriel. He believes the world revolves on his axis, a common affliction among the ambitious. Sarah, of course, believes it revolves around Ben's, a different kind of ambition but equally potent." She sighed, looking out at the dense trees. Nana knew what she was doing. She wanted us to be stripped bare, I think, to confront ourselves and each other without the usual distractions. Or she was just being her usual passive-aggressive self. One last time, I muttered, picturing Nana's mischievous grin, holding her money hostage to make us play nice. Pamela smiled. "Perhaps both. There's often more than one truth to a situation, dear. What do you see happening?" I bit my lip. "A meltdown. Someone's going to snap. Gabriel needs his phone, Sarah needs control, Diana needs peace, and I just need this money to keep my own life from spiraling further." My vulnerability slipped out, unbidden, and Pamela's gaze softened. My student loans were piling up, and a sudden medical bill from an emergency room visit a few months back had gutted my meager savings. This inheritance was my lifeline. "Yes," Pamela said, her voice dropping a little. "The stakes are higher for some than others. Nana knew that too. She wasn't cruel, Sarah. Strategic, yes, but not cruel. She truly believed this would help us in the end. Help us? It felt like we were being set up for a battle royale. The next few days were a masterclass in suppressed tension. Mornings began with Gabriel pacing the cabin perimeter, searching for a phantom signal, his face growing grimmer by the hour. He'd try to compensate by making calls on the cabin's ancient landline, only to be frustrated by crackling static or long waits for his assistants to answer. His conversations were clipped, demanding, punctuated by exasperated sighs. He was clearly losing deals, losing ground. The financial crisis wasn't a hypothetical for him, it was an active bleed. Sarah, meanwhile, took to reorganizing the pantry with the fervor of a drill sergeant, issuing commands about where the canned goods should go, how the spices should be alphabetized. She critiqued Diana's cooking, Gabriel's untidiness, even the way I stacked the firewood. "Sarah, darling, wouldn't it be more efficient to stack them largest to smallest? It's better for airflow, you know." It just shrugged, exhausted. Anna, of course, would simply agree, her efforts at peacekeeping now manifesting as quiet subservience, which only seemed to fuel Sarah's need for control. One evening, during what was supposed to be a convivial card game, Gabriel erupted. He'd been losing consistently, his competitive nature chafing under the enforced idleness. "This is ridiculous." He slammed his cards down. "I'm literally bleeding money by the second. My company, it's not just some side project. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise. My investors are expecting updates progress. If this funding round falls through because I'm stuck in a technological black hole playing Go Fish, I'm ruined." Sarah scoffed. "Ruined, Gabriel? You have more money than sense. Perhaps this is a good lesson in humility." "Humility doesn't pay my employees' salaries, Sarah," he retorted, his face flushed. "Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? The sheer scale of what I am trying to achieve?" Anna wrung her hands. "Gabriel, please, dear, we're all feeling the strain. But Nana's wishes were archaic, and frankly punitive." Gabriel stood up, knocking over his chair. "This is insane. We're talking about my entire future here. My legacy." I saw Pamela's eyes flicker towards me, a silent message passing between us. She knew what this meant for me too. Gabriel's anger was palpable, but beneath it, I recognized a desperation that was strangely familiar. He wasn't just entitled, he was genuinely terrified of failure, terrified of losing the status he'd worked so hard to achieve. His ambition was a shield, but it was also a very heavy burden. The next morning, the cabin woke to an unusual silence. Gabriel was nowhere to be found. His hiking boots were gone from the mudroom. A wave of dread washed over me. He wouldn't dare. Diana was in tears. "He's gone, isn't he? He's left. Oh, Nana, forgive him, forgive all of us." Sarah surprisingly looked pale. "He wouldn't be so stupid. Not with the inheritance at stake. He's always been about self-preservation." Pamela, ever calm, walked over to the landline phone. She dialed a number. After a few rings, she simply listened, then slowly hung up. "The car is gone," she said quietly, "and the road isn't passable. Looks like the recent rain caused a small landslide a few miles back. The county will clear it eventually. No one's getting in or out of here for a while." Wave of relief mixed with utter panic washed over me. Relief because Gabriel hadn't actually left, not truly, meaning the inheritance might still be safe. Panic because, for someone as tightly wound as Gabriel, being trapped, truly trapped, without a connection to his world would push him to his breaking point. And if he broke, what would happen to us? Later that day, Gabriel reappeared, mud-splattered and furious. He'd walked for miles, tried to move the rocks, screamed at the unfeeling mountain. His carefully constructed facade had cracked wide open. He was a mess. "It's impossible," he seethed, slamming the door. "We are completely cut off. I can't get an Uber out here, I can't call for a helicopter, I can't even send an email. Do you understand what this means?" He looked at all of us, his eyes wild. "My company? It's vulnerable. Without me, without my input, it could collapse everything I've built." Gone, he was genuinely terrified. And as the days crawled by, his terror only grew. He started making desperate, irrational plans. He suggested we all pool our money to buy a satellite phone, an astronomical sum none of us really had. He tried to convince Diana to break down and tell him where Nana kept her emergency cash, convinced he could pay someone to clear the road faster. Then came the texts. First from Sarah's phone, then Diana's, then mine. Little flashes of connection would happen randomly, a single bar appearing for a few moments, just enough for a message to ping through. Not enough for a call or for Gabriel to actually conduct business, but enough to torment us. One message, a particularly terse one, came from Gabriel's head of sales. Gabriel, urgent. Call me immediately. Competitor just announced their Series B. You need to respond now. Another from his investor relations contact. Board is asking questions. A radio silence is a problem. We need an update by end of week. Gabriel saw the messages over our shoulders, his face growing paler with each one. He started to visibly shake. He paced, he muttered to himself, he pulled at his hair. He was unraveling. One evening, about a week into our forced retreat, he cornered me in the kitchen. Deanna and Sarah were arguing in the living room over the merits of organic versus conventional coffee. Pamela was outside, probably communing with the trees. Sarah, he said, his voice low, desperate, unlike anything I'd heard from him before. You have to understand. My entire life savings, every cent, is tied up in this company. If this funding round doesn't close, if I lose my investors, I don't just lose the company. I lose everything. My house, my car, my reputation, everything. He actually looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time since we arrived, and I saw the raw fear in his eyes. What do you want me to do, Gabriel? I asked, my own stomach clenching. My life wasn't nearly as grand as his, but the stakes felt just as high for me. My future, my ability to stay afloat, hinged on this inheritance. He swallowed hard. There's a small, private airstrip about 50 miles from here. I found it on an old map of Nana's. If I could get there, I could charter a plane. Get to city with proper signal, proper internet. I could salvage this, but I need someone to help me get there. Paused, his eyes darting towards the living room, where the muffled sounds of Diana and Sarah's ongoing discussion continued. I need someone to go with me to keep up the appearance that we're all here, just for a day. We can make an excuse, a supply run to a town no one knows, a hike that takes longer than expected. Just long enough for me to secure the funding. No one has to know I left, and then it'll come straight back, if I don't. If this falls apart, then none of us get anything anyway. But if I succeed, it'll make sure you're taken care of, Sarah. More than the inheritance would ever give you, I swear it. He was asking me to conspire with him, to lie, to risk Nana's entire will on a desperate gamble. The core of Nana's condition was that everyone asterisk had to be present. If Gabriel was gone, even for a few hours, even if we claimed he wasn't, the inheritance would be voided. But if he was right, if his company genuinely collapsed, then the inheritance would be irrelevant anyway. This wasn't just about Gabriel's entitlement anymore. This was about his survival. And maybe, just maybe, it was about mine too. The forest outside seemed to press in, the cabin suddenly too small, too quiet, filled with the unspoken weight of his proposal, of the desperate choice he was forcing upon me. Could feel the sharp edge of the dilemma, cutting me between what felt right and what felt necessary, the thin line between moral integrity and sheer, desperate self-preservation. My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing the question in the room. Could I trust him? Could I risk everything on his word? And what would happen if I said no? My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing the question in the room. Could I trust him? Could I risk everything on his word? And what would happen if I said no? Thought of denying him, of watching him unravel completely and potentially sabotage the entire inheritance for everyone, was a heavy weight. But so was the thought of actively lying, of jeopardizing Nana's last peculiar wish for a man who had, until now, only demonstrated self-serving entitlement. I looked at Gabriel, really looked at him, past the designer clothes and the polished persona, and saw the flicker of genuine fear, a raw, primal terror of financial ruin. It mirrored my own, just on a grander scale. My student loans, the medical bill, the tightrope walk of my own meager finances, it was a different kind of pressure, but the desperation felt the same. He was cornered, just like I was. Maybe, I thought, just maybe, this desperate situation had stripped away enough of his bravado to reveal something real. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant murmur of Deanna and Sarah's bickering. Okay, I said, the word a whisper, feeling it settle in the pit of my stomach like a stone. But if we do this, it's my way. No more of your grand schemes. We stick to the story and you keep your word. 100%. No excuses. His eyes, wide with a relief that was almost startling, met mine directly for the first time. Thank you, Sarah. You won't regret this, I swear it. He sounded genuinely grateful, a new note in his typically commanding voice. It was enough to give me a sliver of hope. We concocted a plan. The supply run was a perfect cover. The cabin was always running low on something, thanks to Sarah's insistence on using only obscure, artisanal ingredients for Diana's standard recipes. Wed claimed to hike to a little-known, smaller town that Nana sometimes visited for specialty items. Story would be that the general store in town was surprisingly well-stocked, and Wed spent longer than expected looking for a particular brand of organic, gluten-free, locally sourced something or other that Sarah had just discovered she absolutely couldn't live without. Deanna would be a worrywart, but ultimately trusting. Sarah would be suspicious, but too consumed by her own demands to put too much effort into disproving it. Key was to be gone for less than 24 hours, enough time for Gabriel to get to the airstrip, make his calls and get back, but not so long as to cause a full-blown alarm. We would leave at dawn. The next morning, the air was crisp and cold. We slipped out just before the others stirred, leaving a note about our adventure. The hike to the makeshift road was longer and rougher than I anticipated, but Gabriel, surprisingly, didn't complain. His frantic energy seemed to have focused, honed by the very real stakes. He helped me over treacherous routes, offered me his water bottle, and even once pointed out a particularly beautiful hawk circling overhead, a flash of the ambitious, yet perhaps not entirely heartless, man beneath the layers of entitlement. He was still Gabriel, impatient and driven, but the raw edge of desperation had sanded down some of his sharper corners. We reached the landslide site. It was bigger than Pamela had described, a true natural barrier of earth and rock. Gabriel looked at it, a grim determination in his eyes. He found a narrow, winding deer trail he'd spotted on his initial reconnaissance, a path barely visible through the thick undergrowth, leading around the worst of the debris. It was slow going, arduous, but we pushed through. When we finally reached the main road, muddy and scratched, a beat-up pickup truck was waiting. Gabriel had somehow managed to arrange it using the landline, promising the driver an absurd sum of money upon arrival. The driver, a laconic local, simply nodded, clearly accustomed to eccentric city folk and their odd requests. The drive to the airstrip was tense. Gabriel pulled out a beat-up burner phone he'd apparently stashed for emergencies. As we got closer to civilization, a single bar of signal flickered on. His eyes lit up, a frantic, almost manic relief washing over his face. He started making calls immediately, his voice low and urgent, a rapid-fire succession of commands and pleas. I watched him, observing the transformation from desperate man to ruthless businessman. He was good, I had to admit. He was convincing. He was fighting for his life, just like I was fighting for mine. We reached the airstrip, a small, deserted stretch of asphalt tucked away in a clearing. A tiny, single-engine plane was already waiting, its propeller glinting in the morning sun. Gabriel shook the pilot's hand, a wad of cash exchanged, and then, with a brief, almost shy nod to me, he climbed aboard. "Thank you, Sarah," he called over the roar of the engine. "I won't forget this." And then he was gone, a tiny speck against the vast blue sky. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? Or had I just secured my future? I had to trust him. There was no other choice now. The journey back was solitary, my mind replaying the last few hours. The physical exertion, the mental strain of the lie, the sheer gamble of it all, it was exhausting. I reached the cabin in the early afternoon, hours before Id anticipated. Deanna rushed to me, relief washing over her face. "Sarah Belle, darling, you're back. Where's Gabriel? Did you find that obscure herb Sarah insisted on?" I mumbled something about him needing to scout ahead for a better path back, and how he'd be along soon, and yes, Id found the obscure herb, and no, I didn't want to talk about it. Sarah, ever the skeptic, eyed me. "You look a mess, Sarah. Are you sure you didn't get into some trouble?" "That boy is always trouble." I just shrugged, too tired to argue, and retreated to my room. I collapsed onto the bed, the familiar knot of anxiety still in my stomach. The waiting game had begun. Days later, Gabriel returned. He looked even more disheveled than I did after the trek, but there was a light in his eyes, a flicker of renewed confidence that hadn't been there before. He had his burner phone in his hand, a full 3 bars of signal displayed. He looked at me, a genuine smile breaking through his exhaustion. "It worked, Sarah. It actually worked. The funding round is back on track. Had a full day of meetings, secured a bridge loan, and even managed to smooth things over with a few key investors. I owe you." He didn't mention the details, but the relief radiating from him was palpable. He looked, for the first time since we arrived, like he could breathe again. The rigid tension in his shoulders had eased. He even joked, a dry, self-deprecating comment about how he never thought he'd be so happy to see a landline again. I managed to get a signal on the burner phone on the way back, enough to tell the driver to wait for me further down the road from the landslide, so I hiked the rest of the way alone, just in case. He paused, looking at Diana and Sarah, who were both giving him the once-over, clearly suspicious but unable to pinpoint anything concrete. "Rough hike," he said, addressing them generally, his voice carefully casual. "Glad to be back." He shot me a quick, grateful look. We had pulled it off. The cabin returned to its usual rhythm of suppressed tension and passive-aggressive remarks, but something had shifted. Gabriel, though still highly strung and quick to frustration when the phone signal inevitably dropped again, was noticeably less panicked. He even joined in the chores, something he'd previously considered beneath him. He made an effort to engage with Diana, asking about Nana's life, and to my surprise, even tried to placate Sarah, albeit clumsily, when she complained about the lack of fresh organic produce. He was a completely different person, but the absolute, crushing terror that had defined him seemed to have receded, replaced by a more familiar, if still intense, drive. And his interactions with me had changed. He would seek me out, not to complain, but to discuss things, to strategize about how to keep up the appearance of everyone being present, or to just talk about the business world he'd been so desperate to cling to. He even offered to help me with my student loan issues, saying he knew some people who specialized in financial advising, an offer I politely, but firmly, declined. I appreciated the gesture, but I wanted this inheritance to be earned, not a handout. Most profound shift, however, came from an unexpected source, Sarah. Her initial suspicion about Gabriel and me had slowly morphed into a heightened level of anxiety. She was constantly on her phone, checking the signal, even though she claimed to despise technology. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen, her face pale, staring at her phone with wide, frantic eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately sensing her distress. He didn't answer at first, then looked up, her usual controlled facade completely shattered. "It's Ben," she choked out, her voice raw. He's not doing well at summer camp. He called just for a second on a landline from the camp office. He sounded so lost. He said he hates it there. He wants to come home. He's always been so resilient, so bright. I don't understand. The camp director said he's struggling with independence. He sounded so dismissive. She wrung her hands, a gesture I'd only ever seen Diana make. I wanted him to have this experience to boost his resume for college to make him more well-rounded. But I think I made a mistake, Sarah. I pushed him too hard. He said he feels like he's always performing, always trying to meet my expectations, and he's exhausted. The words tumbled out, unbidden, from a place of deep maternal fear. This wasn't about control or Ivy League resumes anymore. This was about a mother's genuine, albeit misguided, love. He actually said he's scared, Sarah. He's scared of disappointing me. Her voice cracked. My perception of Sarah, the helicopter parent, the critical aunt, fractured then. All her controlling behavior, her perfectionism, her constant need to manage every detail, it wasn't just about her own ego. It was born from a profound fear of her son failing, of him being unhappy, a fear that manifested as overbearing love. I thought she was helping him by controlling his path, when in reality she was suffocating him. This cabin, with its enforced isolation and removal of her usual distractions, had given her the space, the unwanted space, to truly hear her son's distress, and perhaps her own. She started to cry, quiet, racking sobs that shook her impeccably dressed shoulders. I found myself putting an arm around her, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a week ago. "I'll be okay, Sarah," I said, not knowing if it was true, but knowing she needed to hear it. "He just needs to know you're there for him, not just for his resume." That night, Sarah made a decision. She wrote a letter, a long, heartfelt one to Ben. She asked Diana to take it to the nearest town once the road was cleared, to mail it priority. In it, she told him she loved him unconditionally, that his happiness was more important than any college, any resume. She told him he could come home whenever he wanted. It was a small act, but it felt monumental, a true step towards letting go. A week had passed since Gabriel's errand, and the air in the cabin was still thick with unspoken resentments, but now there was a new undercurrent, a strange, fragile solidarity born from shared discomfort and quiet personal revelations. The road remained impassable, meaning we were still completely cut off. One rainy afternoon, we were all gathered in the living room, Pamela reading quietly, Diana knitting, Gabriel trying to get a signal from the window, and Sarah staring pensively out at the rain. The conversation, as always, drifted towards Nana, and then inevitably to the will. "I still think it's completely unfair," Sarah mused, her voice softer than usual, "to hold us all hostage like this." What was she thinking? Gabriel sighed, turning from the window. "She was thinking of us, Sarah." Oh, admittedly, in the most inconvenient way possible. He looked at me, a silent acknowledgement of our shared secret. "I think she wanted us to talk, truly talk, without the noise of our daily lives." Diana nodded slowly. She always believed in family above all else. She worried about us drifting apart, becoming too focused on other things. Her gaze drifted to Gabriel, then to Sarah. She wanted us to find our way back to each other, and that's when it hit me. My initial perception of Nana's will as a purely passive-aggressive act, a final, spiteful manipulation, began to crumble. Pamela's words from the first day echoed in my mind. She truly believed this would help us in the end. What if she wasn't holding her money hostage, but holding us hostage to force us to confront not just each other, but ourselves? To strip away the distractions and the pretenses, make Gabriel see beyond his bottom line, to make Sarah see beyond her expectations for Ben, to make Diana finally acknowledge her own needs, and for me to stop viewing everything through the lens of survival and start seeing the nuances, the underlying fears, the messy, complicated humanity beneath the facades. The difficult conversation started subtly, then erupted. It began with Diana, unexpectedly, finally articulating a quiet frustration she'd held for years. I wish we could be honest with each other," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "About everything. About our fears, our struggles. We always put on a brave face, but it's so exhausting." Sarah, surprisingly, was the first to respond. "She's right," she admitted, looking at Diana, then at Gabriel, then at me. "I was so worried about Ben, about his future, about him being perfect. But I think all I did was make him feel like he wasn't enough. I was so critical of all of you, pushing you, trying to control things because I was so terrified of everything falling apart. My marriage was never what it seemed, you know? It ended with so much silence, so much unresolved. I clung to Ben's success because it felt like the only thing I had any control over." The raw vulnerability in her voice silenced the room. Gabriel, for once, didn't try to interrupt or deflect. He was listening, truly listening. "I understand that," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I built my company on the belief that if I was successful enough, if I achieved enough, it'd be immune to feeling like I wasn't enough. Like I needed to prove myself to Nana, to my father, to everyone who ever doubted me. The thought of losing it all, of being seen as a failure, was worse than anything." He looked around, meeting each of our gazes. "I was so desperate, I was willing to risk everything, including Nana's wishes, to save myself. And Sarah, thank you for not letting me do that alone. For seeing past my usual nonsense." He even managed a wry, self-deprecating smile. "I really thought I was above all this emotional stuff. Turns out I'm just as messed up as everyone else." Pamela, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke, her voice soft but resonant. "We all carry our burdens, dear ones." Nana knew that. She knew that sometimes the only way to truly unburden ourselves is to share them, to see that others carry similar weights. And that sometimes the most valuable things aren't measured in dollars or achievements, but in connection, in honesty. I felt a shift within myself. I had been so focused on my own financial crisis, my own survival, that I had failed to truly see Gabriel's terror or Sarah's underlying fears. I had judged them, dismissed them as entitled or controlling, without seeking to understand why. My own resilience had often manifested as a protective shell, keeping others out, keeping my own vulnerabilities hidden. I realized now that I had to be part of this honesty too. I was so angry about all of this, I confessed, my voice surprisingly steady. About the money, about being stuck here. I felt like Nana was messing with my life from beyond the grave, making things harder than they already were. This inheritance, it's my lifeline. It's the difference between staying afloat and drowning in debt. I judged all of you for your privilege, for your complaints, when I was just as desperate, just as selfish in my own way. I looked at Gabriel. "When you asked me to go with you, I said yes because I was scared. Scared of what you'd do if I said no, scared of losing the inheritance, but also a small part of me was scared that if I didn't help you, you'd unravel and we'd all lose anyway. I saw your fear, Gabriel, and it made me see my own." That difficult conversation, born of desperation and forced proximity, continued for hours. We talked about Nana, about our childhoods, about the hidden wounds and unacknowledged fears that had shaped us. Nana, emboldened by Sarah and Gabriel's vulnerability, finally confessed her exhaustion with being the family peacemaker, her own quiet resentment at always having to put others' needs before her own. She admitted to wanting to pursue her own quiet dreams, to travel, to finally live for herself. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a gradual unburdening. The air in the cabin cleared, almost tangibly. The weight of unspoken words lifted. Remaining days of our stay weren't magically harmonious, but they were different. Arguments still arose, but they were quicker to resolve, tinged with a new understanding, a shared acknowledgement of each other's humanity. Gabriel still had his moments of impatience, but he would catch himself, sometimes with a self-deprecating chuckle. Sarah still offered unsolicited advice, but now with an underlying current of genuine care rather than a need for control. Anna began to assert herself more, gently but firmly, expressing her own needs and desires. The landside cleared a day before our 2 weeks were up, a final twist of Nana's strategic timing. The outside world, with its pressures and demands, beckoned. The reading of the will's final clauses, 3 weeks after we left the cabin, was surprisingly anticlimactic. Mr. Henderson, still perpetually tired, confirmed that the conditions had been met. The inheritance would be split as intended. Gabriel even managed a small, genuine smile when he heard it. The money, substantial as it was, felt different now. It wasn't just a lifeline. It was a symbol of what we had gone through, a testament to the fact that we hadn't broken, but had, in some small, imperfect way, healed. Gabriel, true to his word, had quietly connected me with a pro bono financial advisor who helped me navigate my student loans and medical bills, providing practical support without infringing on my independence. He didn't make a big show of it. It was simply a quiet act of gratitude and perhaps a sign of his evolving understanding of what true support meant. Sarah did call Ben and told him to come home. And to my surprise, their relationship seemed to be recalibrating, moving towards a healthier, more reciprocal space. Deanna, with a newfound spring in her step, booked a trip to Italy, a lifelong dream she'd always deferred. And me? I paid off my immediate debts, secured a small, manageable apartment, and felt a profound sense of relief. The inheritance was a fresh start, but the real gift, I realized, was what had happened in that cabin. Forced isolation, the difficult conversations, the messy, painful process of seeing past facades, it had opened my eyes, not just to others, but to myself. I still believed in resilience, but now I understood that true resilience wasn't just about surviving alone. It was about confronting your own fears, acknowledging your vulnerabilities, and finding strength, sometimes, in the unexpected connections forged in the face of shared desperation. The smell of pine and panic had faded, replaced by the scent of fresh starts, and the faint, enduring echo of Nana's mischievous, profound wisdom.